when I was a new veterinarian, it was pretty straightforward. We called it chipping fever or pasteurellosis because it was predominantly caused by Pasteurella hemolytica, now called Mannheimia hemolytica.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm your host, Brandy Buzzard, and it's my pleasure to bring you the latest trends and issues from the best and brightest minds in the beef industry.
Well, thank you very much. I guess I've never thought of myself as the best and brightest, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Today, we are joined by Dr. Eugene Janzen, Professor Emeritus of Buiatrics at University of Calgary Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Janzen received his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Dr. Janzen spent 3 years practicing in northeastern Alberta before returning to the Western College of Veterinary Medicine on an Alberta-sponsored fellowship to complete a postgraduate degree. Dr. Janzen received an MVS degree from the University of Melbourne in Australia in 1977, and also in 1977, he accepted a position with the ambulatory clinic at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. In this position, Dr. Janzen has spent his time working with a general interest in beef cattle medicine. Dr. Janzen became associated with Feedlot Health Management Services in 2003. As you can see, he has had a long career in various different expertise, and I'm really looking forward to talk to him today about all things beef health and feedlot health. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Janzen. How are you?
All right, thank you. Looking forward to this.
Well, I'm really happy to have you here. And I must admit, before I started preparing for this episode, I'm a little embarrassed. I had never heard of the word buiatrics before. So do you want to enlighten us to what that is? Because I know it now, but maybe the rest of our audience doesn't.
Well, it's a little bit more European, and a veterinarian that's interested in livestock, cattle especially, would be called a buiatrician.
I have not heard that word either.
Well, that sounds a whole lot better than a cattle vet.
Yeah, it's definitely more eloquent.
Yes.
Well, for those who have not had a chance to meet you or learn more about your career, I know that I just touched on a few high points, but if you want to bring us up to speed on your background, what made you want to get started in the beef and cattle industry, and kind of your work so far, use this time to bring us up to speed, please.
I was a farm kid, but mostly a grain farm. And my dad told me, no, I don't want you to be a farmer because you've got to depend on the weather. And that was a big deal in those days. So he sent me to university, and I ended up becoming a veterinarian. And my interest really was cow-calf or ranches. And that's what I spent my time doing. But one of my colleagues at the university, whose primary function was to look after feedlots, resigned. So I got left with both the cow-calf and the feedlot side. So that sort of typifies what happened and why I ended up doing what I've done.
Everyone knows vitamin D affects bone formation, immunity, and growth. What everyone doesn't know is research shows cattle don't get enough vitamin D. High D from DSM Firmenich optimizes health and growth with a more bioavailable form of vitamin D. And data shows high D fed heifers weighed over 8 pounds more at weaning. Don't let your cattle be vitamin deficient. Meet the growing needs of your herd year-round with high D. Learn more at dsm-firmenich.com/hy-d.
Well, that is a good kind of segue into a major topic that I know you focused a lot on. You worked a lot in cow-calf, but also kind of took over the feedlot. And to my understanding, BRD is a pretty big issue in feedlots in the United States and Canada, just in general. So can you provide any insight into some of the work you've done in BRD, and we can just kind of transition into that?
I guess one of the things that when I look back that I find fascinating is that people with gray hair like me appreciate how bovine respiratory diseases changed. When I was a new veterinarian, it was pretty straightforward. We called it shipping fever or pasteurellosis because it was predominantly caused by Pasteurella hemolytica, now called Mannheimia hemolytica. Well, as time has moved on, we began to figure out how to deal with that particular pathogen. We used what we call metaphylaxis, or as livestock came into the feed yard, we would give them all the best long-acting antibiotic we had. Not really appreciating one of the other things we were doing was we were affecting the microbiome. So we were eliminating or seriously affecting Mannheimia, but allowing other pathogens to sort of exist or manifest themselves. So that's probably the biggest change I've seen in my lifetime. And I notice our young people, our students, aren't aware of that particular change. And that's taken something like 30 or 40 years for that to happen.
I feel like you've touched on it a little bit, but what kind of changes do you feel? I mean, you said the change in the bacteria, but are there other changes?
I mean, Mannheimia, for gray-haired guys like me, Mannheimia was a gift almost, because it produced a toxin which made the cattle sick. So it didn't matter whether you were a good cowboy or an in-between cowboy, or even a weekend sort of a person. You could tell the animal was sick and needed to be treated. Well, as we've dealt with that pathogen and other pathogens have arisen, to identify animals that are sick with pneumonia has become much more difficult. So that's the problem we're faced with nowadays.
Now I'm following along better now. Now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that. What are some of those current causes that you're going to see in feed yards? Like I'm not a feedlot person. We're cow calf and we, knock on wood, haven't had that issue. So but like what's going to cause that to spring up and put people on edge?
Well, probably the most common one that we're concerned about is something that's called Mycoplasma bovis. So it belongs to that family of Mycoplasma species, and it is not as responsive to antimicrobials. So as we eliminate or minimize the effect of Mannheimia, that allows some of these other pathogens like Mycoplasma sort of to become a significant part of the respiratory microbiome. The microbiome just being all the bacteria or all the pathogens, not necessarily all bacteria, that are in the respiratory tract. So that means that respiratory disease in the bovine in a feed yard has changed significantly. And one of the, probably like, without listing all of them, which I would struggle to do, probably the one that we hear the most about is that Mycoplasma species.
So in that example you just gave about treating one and then others flare up, is that a treatment failure or a selection failure?
Well, what happens is that it becomes more difficult with these different pathogens to select animals for treatment. That's the biggest change. So way back, yes, we spent a lot of time talking about treatment failure. And that was because we treated them too late, or we didn't use the correct antimicrobial, or the antimicrobial or the pathogen that happened to be there, which of course now is a very big deal, was resistant to the antimicrobials we were using. That essentially composed what we talked about with treatment failure. But selection failure, oh my, it's not uncommon that many of the animals that die with respiratory disease nowadays have never been selected for treatment. And part of that is because without that toxemia that Mannheimia produced, boy, it's difficult to tell. It's not easy to identify that they're sick with pneumonia.
Right. I mean, it makes sense. If you aren't selecting them, how do you treat them? And if they're not showing symptoms, how do you select them? So that makes sense, kind of that chain reaction, or the lack of that chain reaction. You were talking earlier about the changes of this respiratory biome or microbiomes. What has been done in your time to kind of address that? Like, are we using different antimicrobials? Are we focusing more on procedures in feedlots? Like, what kind of caused that? And then what are we doing to I guess, deal with that, or to handle those changes?
I mean, I don't know how long ago the scientists were writing about respiratory disease. They talked about one of the most important things is co-mingling.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring animals together, lo and behold, they share those organisms. And with that sharing, and depending on their level of immune response, disease conditions will happen. So that's probably the most important thing that's really not changed. We still, livestock peoples, and we even begin to notice it on ranches where, even though they've been living out in the outback for who knows how long, when you gather them together, the calves share whatever organisms they had in their respiratory tract, and some become ill. So we've really accentuated that with our auction markets, where we have the way we market livestock. There'll be livestock coming from a whole variety of sources. They'll be mixed, and then they'll be purchased and taken to a feed yard where they'll be mixed again. So that mixing is probably hasn't changed. It's always been like that. Although some of the feedlots and some of the ranches avoid taking their cattle for sale to a central location. They sell it online, and they go directly from the ranch or the sales. Well, they don't get to the sales barn, but wherever they're grazed will go directly to the feedlot, and that spares some of that co-mingling and the sharing of pathogens when that happens. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the kindergarten class at the sale barn definitely does contribute to some of that, those micro, just sharing all those organisms. When they get to the feed yard, even if they've been shipped off the ranch directly to the feed yard, there's still and maybe one producer's calves fill a whole pen at the feed yard. So they're not mixed with somebody else's, but they're still going to have fence line contact with someone else's cattle, even if they're not mixed thoroughly. So I imagine there's still some risk there.
it's been very difficult to prove how significant fence line contact is. One of the things that is a fairly recent development is people have looked at the water bowls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you would share water bowls, that probably I would guess, we don't know definitively, but people have begun to wonder about that because some of the new information coming out has looked at pathogen contamination of water bowls. So that's been demonstrated as being factual.
That makes sense. If I have we have automatic waters at our house for, I think everything is on automatic waters now that I'm thinking about it. And if I have a horse with a snotty nose, I am putting that horse in the pen that doesn't share an automatic water with anything else because I don't want that to happen. And so that makes perfect common sense how that could be an issue at a feed yard. Is that some of the kind of animal health data that can be captured in a feedlot on a regular basis?
Oh, I don't think feedlot owners would be sampling the water bowls for pathogens. But one of the things, if you see any new feedlot pens, for sure they wouldn't be sharing the water bowls. Like
Mm-hmm.
a pen would have a water bowl that would be distinct to that pen, and it would not be in the corral wall so that two pens could drink out of the same bowl. That wouldn't happen anymore.
Not in a new build.
That's one of the things, that's about the only thing that I can think of where we've done or where something has actually happened dramatically to illustrate that.
I can imagine in your career, there's a lot of different health data that has changed in terms of collection, right? So I understand that we're not collecting data about like the bacteria in the different waterers, but during your career, how have you seen animal health data collection change?
Well, probably one of the most significant things we've noticed is that originally the stock attendants would only put a dangle tag in an animal that they'd selected for treatment. Must be about 30 years ago, feedlots began to tag every animal that came in, and it would be tagged by processing group. So, and the computer would remember that. So that's probably the biggest change, is that the files in a feedlot were computerized. Prior to that, the stock attendants would pull an animal and tag it and write down what they did on a 5x7 index card. And so the computer essentially duplicated that, except when you selected an animal for treatment, you would know, or the computer would tell you how long it had been in a feedlot. So, and students and stock attendants know it by DOF, or days on feed. So you would know what the days on feed were for the animal that you had in front of you. It didn't take very long, and the chute system would made a huge difference. You could identify the animal nowadays, or that's about 15 years ago, we started using RFID tags. So you could interrogate those animals with a wand.
Right.
But it didn't take very long, and feedlots built those wands into the head gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you captured an animal in the head gate, it would automatically record who it was. And before you could even turn around, it would be on the screen behind you.
Right.
And not only who it is, but its weight. Mm-hmm. Because most of the chutes were a weigh scale. And the computer would tell you, or you could know, oh, my goodness, it's gained a pound a day in the last 35 days, or the other way around. This animal really hasn't done anything. So that's probably the most significant change that we've seen in record keeping. And of course, with that sophistication in computerization, you could standardize your treatment. I mean, if suddenly an animal ran in, or you ran an animal in and it had been treated 3 times and hadn't been gaining weight, the computer would tell you, don't let it go back to the home pen. Put it into the chronic pen, or something like that.
Yeah.
So there was a variety of assignments that the computer would give to the stock attendant that it would be highly unlikely they would have ever remembered that, or that would be written down on. Well, the first thing was very difficult to find an index card for an animal that you treated a month ago.
Right, exactly. Thousands of cards.
Yeah, very difficult.
Yeah.
The other thing, probably the most recent thing that's changed, is avoid the use of the hospital. So what they would do is you would select the sick animals in that pen and run them into the access alley at the back, and they would be treated in that access alley. There would be a facility, a gate, and a head gate, and they'd have a mobile hospital, and then you would turn them back into their home pen.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that happened, of course, was in not so long ago, the stock attendants would select sick cattle out of all the pens along that alleyway, and then they would run them up to the hospital. Well, so there was additional co-mingling within the feedlot and within the hospital, and it was very easy to demonstrate that if in a pen you had treated many animals there with an antimicrobial, lo and behold, you could soon show that the other animals that they were associated with also had that same antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah.
So feedlots nowadays are way more epidemiologically friendly than they were when I was a pup. Yes.
I can only imagine just thinking about the sheer amount of time that the development and use of technology like of button tags has helped save in terms of time. I'm sure it's helped save costs on not only on labor, but on like the use of antimicrobials, because you're not accidentally giving one, treating it multiple times because you can't find the right note card or something. And just the time of not having to like dial, flip through where, the note cards for each thing. I am curious, like in the case of metaphylaxis in like treatment of feedlot cattle. I mean, just having to do that on every note card for a whole pen of cattle and then run them back. That's mind-boggling. I'm glad that I wasn't doing my research in grad school using a note card system. I'm quite thankful to have been in grad school after that kind of went away.
I have to admit, I did send some of my residents out to feed yards, and they got very frustrated looking at those treatment cards. And I had one resident that stacked them by the day of the week.
Oh.
And he could tell that on Sunday, there weren't as many people or as many stock attendants at the feed yard, so they didn't pull as many.
Ah.
And the other thing he noticed was that almost I don't remember exactly what it was, but there were more dead cattle coming out of Monday's treatments than out of the rest of the week.
Huh.
Because those that were missed on Sunday,
because there wasn't enough people,
were pulled on Monday, and therefore were, lo and behold, the pathology of that respiratory disease had advanced so far that treatment was ineffective.
Wow. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, I mean, that's just an interesting way to find those things out.
Yes.
Really
yes,
interesting.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I was fascinated just when he brought that to me and showed that to me. Oh my! I was just astounded that he could learn that so easily.
Yeah.
By being so persistent, and he was persistent. Yes.
That is highly interesting. I find logistics and things like that and quality assurance very interesting. So that's really fascinating for sure. But that's probably, we have a way to track that differently now to know that in a much faster way for sure. I just want to thank our audience for listening, and remember, if that you're enjoying this episode of the Beef Podcast presented by Wisenetics, to please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family and the rest of your network. Dr. Janzen, what are you kind of expecting in terms of animal health and BRD in the beef industry, or maybe just animal health in general in feedlot? What kind of trends are you seeing in the coming years?
I hope that our identification technology will become at least as advanced as some of the sophisticated electronic collars in dairy cattle, so that stock attendants will be able to just scan their telephone as they ride into a pen. Oh, wait a minute. There's 3 animals that the identification system has identified that should be selected for examination.
That would be nice. Yeah, I mean, like a body temperature or
body temperature, movement, and if there was a way that we could tell whether they'd been close to the feed bunk or the water bowl.
Yeah.
So if there were 4 or 5 things we could determine from their active tags, I think that's the next horizon, because as we keep changing the pathogens, I anticipate that it'll become more and more difficult to identify and select animals that need to be treated.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely some of that technology now, like in terms of the geo tracking and how much an animal is spending time laying down or movement. And obviously there's stuff about body temperature. And like heart rate, but I don't know if it's all in one device. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, and it works on a 20 head pen.
Mm-hmm.
But we need it to work on a 500 head pen.
Right.
And we need it to be relatively inexpensive. I mean, the tags can't be cost out of sight money.
Well, I wonder if they could be made to be reusable. If they're collars that could be reusable.
Yes.
That you'd have a really large upfront cost initially, and you'd have the labor cost of the time and labor cost of
all of the above.
Equipment.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, once you got that done, that'd be a wonderful way to save pen writing time for sure.
Well, I worry a little bit that we're expecting too much of some of our stock attendants, because
I think that's very fair.
Cattle lie.
Yes, they hide
that they're sick nowadays.
They don't want to pump in front of you. They want you to just keep walking by them.
Yes.
I've trying to when my daughter and I go and check calves, I'm trying to teach her to like sit in the back seat and roll the window down just a little bit, and I'll drive by and not look at the calf, and I'll tell her to like look at the calf, because it's not looking at her in the back seat peeking out the window. It's looking at me driving. So we're trying to like tag team and be as sneaky as the calf is when we're looking for sick ones.
Mm.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. I don't know that it's very efficient, but we're trying, and she's learning what to look for in sick cattle as well. So there is some learning going on there. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience about your experiences with feedlot health or BRD or things of that nature?
Well, I guess the other thing that I notice, we've just had a feedlot rotation I've participated in with students from everywhere. And one of the things that they notice is the animals that we have to euthanize. So normally animals that have respiratory disease, they're polite and they die. But if they're lame with a variety of different lamenesses, some of those fail and ultimately become completely non-responsive no matter what you do. And somebody has to decide what happens. And inevitably, that happens in animals that you can't salvage. So we destroy them, and essentially they're sort of peripheral to the feedlot. And yet I notice those stock attendants that have that assignment, they develop a little bit of PTSD, I think. Not been documented, but that if that becomes part of your job, that you've got to go out in the morning and walk through the different pens and decide what you're going to do with some of those that haven't responded, and inevitably it's mostly lame ones,
Right.
More than animals that have respiratory disease. So that's the other thing that I've noticed. And just watching our young people, watching our students and observing them, that's been quite an education for me.
I hadn't thought about that, about the, to put in your words, the PTSD that comes with that. But I can imagine that's similar to why people who work in a slaughter facility are rotated through,
yes,
the kill floor. They don't stay they're not spending a 20-year career, 20 years on the kill floor. They rotate through that. And I imagine there's a lot of that same methodology and mental health awareness given to that.
Exactly.
It's time for our famous three.
Well, Dr. Janzen, I have enjoyed talking to you so much about these different feedlot health aspects, but we have come to the part of our episode where I ask our guests the same closing question. I ask everybody these same questions. And so I gave you a little bit of a heads up on these. So the first one is, what is your favorite beef or cattle related resource? Could be a website or a book or a pamphlet. Could be a person. That was one of my favorite answers I've ever gotten, was a guest said his favorite beef related resource was his wife. So your favorite beef or cattle related resource?
I think my favorite sort of resource, and it depends on what I'm looking for. It could be a pathologist. It could be, it could be another feedlot practitioner. And of course, the question I'm concerned about will determine what my resource will be.
That's very analytical answer. I like it. Your favorite depends on what you're looking for sure. When you think of someone you admire or look up to, what is a characteristic they possess that has led them to be successful? You don't have to tell us the name of the person if you don't want to, but just maybe one of the characteristics they have.
I guess I'm not sure that I can identify one person, but one of the things that comes up again and again is the enthusiasm of young people. That captivates me. That people often ask, what do you teach? What do you teach? Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say that I learn more from my students, I think, than I teach them. And they're so anxious to learn and enthusiastic and active. That's what I notice. That's my turn on.
I love that. That's very positive. I like hearing that. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It's nice to hear a positive affirmation about young people these days.
Oh, for sure.
Well, that is all the questions and time that we have for today, Dr. Janzen. And so I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about feedlot health. I could talk to you about cattle for hours longer, but I don't know that our audience wants to listen to like a 3-hour long episode, so we'll have to cut it off. If listeners have questions for you or want to learn more about our discussion today or more about your work, where can they do that?
Oh, they can find me on my email address. I think you must have access to that.
I think I do. I will be able to put that in that will be in the show notes for our listeners if you check the show notes after it's published.
Okay.
Okay, so that will be in the show notes. Once again, thank you, Dr. Janzen, for being here. And thank you to our audience for tuning in this week. We'll meet you back here next week for another episode of the Beef Podcast presented by Wisenetics.